The Klingon Empire may be facing civil war. Alexander does not want to be a warrior, and Ambassador Kalar wants a bite on the cheek for old time's sake. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 4, Episode 7. This was entitled Reunion, teleplay by, hang on to your hats, Thomas Perry and Joe Perry, as well as Ronald D. Moore and Brannon Braga. This was directed by, you may have heard of him, Jonathan Frakes. This was November 3rd, 1990. Where were you? Everybody, we have a very special guest for you today. We are ecstatic and super grateful to have Chancellor Gowron himself, Robert O'Reilly, with us. How you doing today, Bob?
Kapla. Well, what more can I say? Kapla.
Oh, this is great.
It was a really incredible show. I mean, the writing was just brilliant. I don't know how they fit so many things into such a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
This episode had a lot of stuff, like you're saying. It felt like it was like I just kept going and going. I'm like, how long is this episode? Because they squeezed so much into this episode. But first, let me give you some really good props for just your performance in this episode. I was smiling from ear to ear watching you. The level of devious, the smile that you had when you were doing your evil, stuff. You were taking such pleasure in it. Yes,
there it is.
Yes, and you were taking such pleasure in just being devious. And I thought the performance was A++. And I just wanted to start out with saying how much I love watching you in this episode.
Thank you. It was fun to do. But it was also frightening too. But it was leading up to the whole thing. It was exhilarating.
Mm-hmm.
Being a Klingon, I was an original fan of the show.
Oh.
If you'd asked me what I wanted to do on the show, I would have said I want to be a Klingon. But I got my wish. It was great.
Well, this is great because this is, to us, we've seen you before on Deep Space Nine, but to the original viewers back in 1990, this is the first time your character was introduced. This is the first time you were introduced yourself. So can you walk us through the auditioning process? Because I couldn't help but as I'm watching your character, my first thought is, I bet he did that in the audition. I bet they like that. I can't help but it's pretty obvious why they chose you, because you're so good and unique at what you do. But could you walk us through that a bit?
Yeah, I had done a show called Manhunt. And I won't go too much into the details, but one of the actors that I was working with in Manhunt behaved in a very wacky way, and he wasn't allowed on the studio lot anymore. So they had to cut my role, and I had done a number of things with scenes with Patrick Stewart. And I think Patrick liked me, and so they kept on having me back to audition. I had about 9 auditions before I got the role of Gowron. And you reach the point where you go, I'm never going to get another Star Trek. So they said, they called my agent, and my agent wasn't very hip to Star Trek. And he called me up and he said, it's some kind of alien they want you for. And he said, I think they said something like a Kling something. And I went, a Klingon? A Klingon? And he said, well, could it be? Yeah. So finally I got the sides. And the description of the character was very like on Klingon. It was they wanted somebody who was very thoughtful, Machiavellian, and quite boring. And I can do that very well. So the first scene, I bored the hell out of them, and that wasn't good. But Frakes was the director, and so he put it upon himself to say, Bob, you know what a Klingon is? And I said, yeah, I know. And he said, okay, the second reading, I want you to go all out. I want you to go crazy. I want you to go as far as you ever have done in your life. And I just went, are you crazy? but I did it, and it was like, it was just, I don't know if it reads here, but it was, I just, turned around. I went like, ah, and I scared the shit out of them. Berman, they had to peel off the ceiling. Um, uh, and Frakes just grinned. He just got this big grin on his face. So I went home and I got the job, which was great. And then I had to go get the wardrobe and makeup. Makeup was extensive. Then finally I got to the set. And Frakes greeted me, as his happy person is always. And he said, now, Bob, I want you to do the eye thing, the whole thing. And I said, what eye thing? And he went, and he did. His head just bowed. He just went. And he said under his breath, not one of those kind of actors. And I knew I had to save the day. So, I went, Jonathan, you mean this? And I went, and he went, yeah, that's it. That's what I want. All the time, every time, all the time, everywhere. And I went, okay. So that's what I did. And I think that what that did was really establish the character as an insane kind of wonderful Klingon, and gave me a step up to the character. I've always been a fan of Klingons, and this was it was a lot of fun to do. From that point on, every director tried to talk me out of doing the eye thing. So, I'd always try to sneak it a little bit in, no matter who the director was. So,
it was a lot for me. It worked 100%.
Yeah,
and what's great about it too is that for me, the eye thing makes me feel like you're on the verge of about to kill me. Right? There's that moment. It's like the look, like I'm about to kill you right now. Yeah. Possibly. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Depends how I feel.
Yeah. They always had this subtext going on that Klingons have different eyes. That we don't have like human eyes. We have, and I always felt like writing to the which is a no-no, and I know, and I never did it, but I always wanted to write to the writers and say, I can kill with like a ray gun out of my eye. I can stun people and animals. I hunt them.
There definitely feels like there's daggers coming out of those things. Yeah, there's some daggers flying from those eyes. But I wanted. Oh, go ahead. I
was just going to finish up on that. Was just going to say, what it is about those eyes, and I'm sure you've heard many people interpret that, but like what Cirroc's saying, and you're saying, you're an alien. You have different kinds of eyes, and it does look like you're aiming to kill something because Klingons are predators, and when it almost looks like when you're opening your eyes, you're kind of calculating your prey there, and then of course the other person can't help but feel like prey. But I just want to jump on that. And I feel like that's not just that it's cool to see and awesome, but you're an alien, you're a predator, you're a warrior. And it makes us feel like, he's about 2 seconds away from pouncing,
And I want to ask you now, because there's, over the years now, you have become essentially the gold standard of Klingon, in my opinion. I measure Klingons against your performance of the Klingon now, because even in this episode, there's other Klingons that are performing. I mean, you have, was it Susie Claxton? Doing a fantastic job as well, just somebody to bounce off with.
I think she was half Klingon, but I'm not sure.
Right. She's half Klingon. And Worf has the human experience in the upbringing, so we don't get him as the kind of blueprint Klingon, essentially. You are the baseline, gold standard. What I see as a Klingon now would measure up against you and the performance you give. And of course, Duras, I don't like him at all anyway, so he's never going to be. He can't qualify.
Well said.
So it becomes you, and then even over the years, it becomes you. It becomes more you through Deep Space Nine and on into the other shows. But what is it about the performance that that you think makes it the essential Klingon kind of character baseline, which you would kind of use as a blueprint, essentially?
Well, my favorite line in that show is one word, and it's so short you can't really see it unless you really zero. It's the very first moment that you see me, and in the remastered version, it's much better than the original. But I come out and I stand next to Patrick Stewart, and I look down at him, and I just, in the worst way I can say it, human. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is just dirt to me. A human is just like filth, and I just love being able to do that, Then a bomb goes off, and we go bluey, but that was my favorite moment in that whole show. It sounds strange, but it just set me up to treat people the way, I think a Klingon would look at this like, these humans are just so, and now I have to bow and kowtow to them, because of what Ayla said.
Let me just add to that before you go, Ryan. I want to say that the moment to me that really defined your character as complex, because what you're saying, I kind of expect that disdain and that just, I don't know, just, disdain for anybody else who's not Klingon, essentially. That I kind of expect. What made me see your clever and your wit and your intelligence was when you went in to negotiate with Kalar about, offering her a position in the council. And she says, "What do you want?" And you look back and you're like, "Well, what do you want?" And that whole little play right there let me say, oh, this is a guy who's layered, complex. He's not just going to kill first. He wants to negotiate. He wants to see where your mind is. So that's where the complexity in how you're performing this Klingon character, to me, I said, this is a character I can definitely eat up and want to see more of.
And this, but that, I have to give kudos to the writers in that, because they gave that to me, and I totally agree with it, because it does make a complexity that is much more fun to watch over time.
Yes.
And very funny in that, because you've been in the spaceships before, but when I was doing the scene, Frank said to me, because the windows are there, the space windows or whatever, and I stood up straight, and he said, your head is in space now. the curvature of the glass, and there's nothing there,
Right.
It's just, he said, you're in space now, Bob.
You got to step a little bit farther away from
a little bit further, away from the.
That's funny. But there were some moments, Bob, that you yourself added the complexity. You made some choices, you added some things that are beyond just predator prey, that are beyond just alpha male, that are beyond just alien. For example, when it's just a small line, when they're talking about the investigation, and Duras says something like, we will go back and do a more thorough investigation, something to that effect. And you're kind of looking down and you say, as will I. But the look in your eyes is more than as will I. The look in your eyes is like, all right, what the hell is going on here? There was so much thought going on in your eyes. And that's so juicy for the viewer, because the line is 3 words, but the look on your face is telling a whole different story. And it was magnificent to see.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But it was because what Patrick just informed us of, and all of a sudden I'm getting, oh, this is a lot more complex. And that, he's a dirty rat, I know he's a dirty rat, but now I know he's a dirty rat,
Yeah, because that's how I felt when you delivered the line as well. Just to piggyback off of that, I felt like you knew it was him now, because there's 2 of you there, right? Yeah, it can only be, it's either me or my guys, or him and his guys, right? And so you for sure now know it's them. It's the other guy, Duras. So I thought you were going to kill Duras actually in that moment. I thought we were going to cut to you just ready to kill him,
Slicing and dicing.
I think I would have if Patrick wasn't, in charge of making me the Klingon leader or him the Klingon. But he was a dead duck no matter what.
He was dead. Either way, he's dead at this episode.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, Robert, can you now? Obviously, we love you and your performance and your character and the writing and Klingons, but can you talk to us about the more human aspect, like you, Robert O'Reilly, the actor, showing up on the set of Star Trek for the first time ever, and probably showing up at like 3:30 in the morning to do all that makeup. But do you remember that day? Do you remember what it was like? Do you remember honing your character while you're looking in the mirror while they're piecing it together and your first feet being set on the sets?
Well, I had been on the set before, but because I did Manhunt, so
right.
But going in for the makeup was like spectacular because Michael Westmore, and I knew him. I knew about his family, and I this is a great Westmore family, and when you get made up like a Klingon, when you're getting into makeup at 4:18 in the morning, closing your eyes, and then I on purpose kept my eyes closed as much as I could, unless he needed me to open my eyes. And when I finally did open my eyes, I was Klingon. I mean, you just, with that kind of makeup on, and I'm a character actor. I've always been a character actor, and to me, that was the height of my career at that moment, because I was an alien, and I played aliens before in the business a few times. So, but that yourself looking like a Klingon, you are a Klingon. And then I put the teeth in, and that was it. I was gone. I was like, I am truly Klingon. There's lots of fun stuff that went on that show, because Kempek, Charlie Cooper, who I took his position as the Klingon leader eventually. We just talked for hours and hours and hours, and he was quite a character. He was an original Ranger and went in to Huck up on D-Day. And Jim Doohan went in D-Day too, and he got. So there was a lot of fun stuff going on. Plus, anytime you work for Frakes, it's just joyous, it's painful to be a Klingon, but you take that toughness of being a Klingon, sweating all the time and the hours and stuff like that, and just put it in the meanness of being a Klingon.
Hey, real quick, since you mentioned Manhunt, here it is. I forgot all about that. It's our first time singing Gowron, but not Robert O'Reilly in the season 2 episode Manhunt. So that was a good knowledge there.
Yeah. No, I think I'm glad that you mentioned Charlie Cooper, the man who played Kempek, because I think he also did a phenomenal job. Yeah, he definitely embodied wisdom and that kind of gravitas to be the head of the Empire. I felt all of that in him, and also felt that Picard owed him a debt of gratitude, or had some kind of kinship with him, that he would honor his request eventually, at the end. So there was a lot to that dignified way that he played Kempek, absolutely. But the ambition and the desire and the youthful energy that you brought to this, the desire to be the leader, I felt was really embodies the kind of spirit that we see in the Klingon. It's this desire to not be challenged or not back down. You know,
and to me, it was what the whole force was for me to be honorable with, and they said Gowron's the only real direction I had from the writers was that they said that in the book they said that Gowron was an outsider. And I think I was an outsider because I made up a whole backstory for it, that I was honorable. And the pieces of, you know what, were not honorable. And the whole empire had turned to crap. And if I got in, I would turn it back to an honorable way of life. And it's funny how politics is coming back to us now in certain ways.
Yeah. But you know what's funny is that's how you played it. That's how I read it, was that you're looking around and you're walking around in filth thinking like these are the people that have destroyed my once beautiful empire. And I want to make that empire the bastion of honor that I think it should be.
Yeah, and that Klingon should be. And so Worf was, even though I was sort of like miffed by the way he was human, you know, he was an ally in all things because he was at least honorable, you know, and Duras were the most dishonorable family in the empire, you know, and so I really had motivation to take it off, you know, and it was a lot of fun doing it.
You knocked it out of the park. It was just so fantastic. You know, your performance, like I said, it's riveting. And then actually knowing kind of a little bit of the future kind of going forward also gives me the advantage of
you know, he's not a one-off.
Yeah, this is not a one-off thing. This is the blueprint right here. So that's one, you know, extra thing to kind of savor. But obviously that only happens because you deliver such a fantastic performance in this episode. That's why they continue to see Gowron and the rise of Gowron and what you do continuing forward. It's not an accident that they keep elevating the roles that they want to see and the responsibility. They give more to the people that shine, and that's evident in the rise of Gowron and what you've eventually become in this show. So I just want to, you know, publicly thank you as a personal friend, somebody who knows you as a person. I think you're just have the same level of integrity and dignity that your character carried, you know, and you carry yourself with that kind of a grace and humor, and you're a very good man. So I appreciate to know you, Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you meet my children? No.
Can I record
I'll write it down.
Send them over? You know, Bob, we only have you for a couple more minutes. And by the way, we really appreciate you taking the time. It's been so cool. And, we know you're heading out shortly. So, you know, it doesn't go unnoticed that you dropped everything very quickly to jump on the show for us. But I'm going to sound like a Star Trek fan here for a minute because I am. But I have a two-part question for you. That sounds like at the conventions. Number one is, can you please, if you remember, name some of the other roles for which you auditioned? Because that would be really interesting to know if you remember any of those. And number two, did you think this was going to be a one-off character? Did you think I might come back? Who knows? Were people winking at you? How did that go?
I knew from the beginning that it wasn't a one-off character. I knew that my agent said once I got it, she said somehow they've told me this is a very important role. So now that usually means you're coming back. But then when I went into makeup, you do the death mask, and and that takes time, and I was in there for like 2 or 3 hours with Michael Westmore, and we were just gabbing and talking. And he said, Bob, this character, it's a life thing. And I went, what? And he said, it's a life thing. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you'll find out. And so that didn't mean to me that I was going to come back all the time, but it did mean to me what I found out was, when you play a Star Trek character, you've done it for life because you're always coming back, to conventions, and it's part of your life. But so Michael Westmore sort of gave me the hint at where this was going,
Mhm.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
and when I became the Klingon leader, which is a couple of shows later, actually got robed. I went, well, what's the half-life of a Klingon leader? Not very.
No, no, no.
It's like with the Duras sisters. The Duras sisters, we got along really well, the four of us, and they called me once and they said, "We got the film. We got the film. We're going to be in the movie." And I paused and I went, "Should I tell them?" And I went, "I better." I said, "Gosh, I'm awful sorry," because if a Klingon gets in a film, they
Yeah,
die.
yeah, that's the rule.
Yeah.
And do you remember any of the roles that you auditioned for?
Oh yeah, I don't know the names of them, but I auditioned for an Irish
Remember that episode? Sure.
guy. I auditioned for an Irish guy, and I forget the rest of them. But what was the guy who got it was Blake. But he's became a very famous actor in films.
Yeah, I don't remember. He was kind
He
of
was in
goofy. This
Harry
was the
Potter.
one Cirroc where Riker, like the lady looks Riker up and down and then has him wash her feet and stuff like that.
Oh
Remember?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, Gowron's
This
a
worked
better
out.
role.
Yeah, this worked out fine.
Much better role. I really, really lucked out. I mean, you couldn't have given me, I couldn't have, playing a Klingon was just, it was the epitome of what I would want to do in theater and film and TV, anything. I caught the ring, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
And just to add, you mentioned it earlier, but the fortuitous thing about Jonathan Frakes directing this episode was another kind of extra thing that helps because Jonathan's so good with talking with actors, being an actor. So when you get those directors like a Jonathan Frakes, who's another gold standard level director, it helps make the whole thing just so much funner and easier.
it much more enjoyable, but also it's like you don't have to fight. You listen, you learn, and I was a very seasoned actor by the time I got there. I'd probably done over 60, 70 shows. Um, but working with him was such ease and such pleasure, and he encouragement, no, go further, go further. That's the right direction. Go further, and that's fun.
Yes.
All the way and have fun doing it. And it's like, and then afterwards, just, you nailed it, Bob. You nailed it. Yeah, great. Yeah, he's just fabulous. He's I directed theater a lot, and back in the day, and I hope I was that kind of director. He was fabulous, just fabulous. So those are those are the roles that I pretty much remember doing. Or
Everybody loves Mr. Frakes, man. Right?
Yeah.
Not a bad word about that guy. Well, Bob, not a bad word about you, by the way. Everybody loves you. But we really appreciate you taking the time. This has been so much fun. We very much look forward to seeing much more of Gowron in Star Trek: The Next Generation now that we've been introduced to him. It's going to be really cool. But thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Well, kapla.
Kapla. All right. Stick around, everybody. We'll be covering this episode much more. So stick around. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. And let us know in the comments below, what was that episode with the Irish? Was it When the Bow Breaks? It was one of those, something like that. Right back.
Oh, I think you might have nailed it. I think it was maybe the Bow Break or something like that.
I think so. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc, the Game Changer Lofton.
Hello, hello.
I want to see you at the Olympics, like cheering on Team USA and going to the basketball team winning the gold medal and all that. That'd be a lot of fun. Okay.
I want that autographed ball that Snoop Dogg got on the bus. I want to know where I can get that.
You should probably be able to buy it for pretty cheap, I bet. I bet that's
Yeah,
yeah.
sure, sure.
Here are the trivioids of the week. They go a little something like this. The Enterprise is investigating radiation anomalies reported in the Gamma Arigulon system by the starship LaSalle. Ambassador Kalar wants a bite on the cheek for old time's sake. The Klingon Empire may be facing civil war. Kempek is dying. Kempek has been poisoned with small doses of Iridium-6 in his wine for months. Alexander does not want to be a warrior. Lieutenant Worf believes Duras to be a traitor. Captain Picard wants to do a long, involved Klingon ceremony or ceremony. Worf's parents will meet him at Starbase 73. Those are the trivioids. So
Okay.
we got two characters introduced. First of all, Bob O'Reilly's awesome as Gowron, and we love him. But we were also introduced to Worf has a son. Who knew?
Yeah, crazy. What a storyline. So first of all, the actor that plays Kalar, this is a return for Susie Plaxton, right?
Right. Yeah. So she played Kalar, a couple seasons ago or something and clearly Alexander is 1 year old, but he looks
Right.
6. So I guess Klingon babies grow up much faster and they learn to speak much faster and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But she was also Dr. Solar, if you'll remember, in the first or the beginning of the second season. Yeah, second season.
Okay.
So this is her third
Yeah.
episode and second character.
Okay. So yeah, I needed a refreshment kind of on. So part of me was like, what happened? What? I was kind of like, what? Like, how long ago was that? Like I remember it, but
It damn sure
so
wasn't 6 or 7 years ago, though. I know that for
it
a
wasn't that
fact.
long ago. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. But clearly, like that whole scene between them where, she says, oh, I guess you're not going to ask, and he's like, a warrior does not ask. He started to basically say he's not going to ask the question that was obvious in the room, right? Is that my kid, right? That was a great scene between the two of them. I think Susie Plaxton is great at playing a love interest for Worf's character. I enjoyed the chemistry between them. Actually, super sad with the ending. It's emotional to see her character die in that kind of a way. And but yeah, as far as the performance she gave, I was really pleased with how she's able to kind of pull Worf's card, the way she stands up to him. Where she's there was a moment there where she says, she keeps probing Worf about why he was disgracefully kicked out of the Klingon Empire,
Yeah.
essentially. And her curiosity reminds me that that is indicative of a relationship type of curiosity. Like you're not going to just brush it off and say, "I'm not answering this question." The more you say that, the more investigation is going to go on. So
They
that
spent
was
one night
of
together, and she's already like, "What's this? What's that? Why? I don't. Well, now hang on a second. That's not a complete enough answer." And Worf is like the other end of things, where he's like,
yeah,
"I do know.
no,
I don't know. I do not understand
yes,
why you must ask questions." Like he's so like,
yes, yeah. Yeah, he's a closed book. So it's like the two opposing forces, which is great because that is what relationships is about. Like these diametrically opposing forces sometimes butting heads and seeing where we're going to go with that. So I love the chemistry between the two of them. Um, I was a little bit disappointed in Worf, you know, um, not showing enough for me uh, emotional connection in on the onset. It felt like he was really distant and wanted to stay distant and didn't want the responsibilities. I didn't feel somebody who was happy to be in that situation. And the thing that bothers me about that is it's my understanding that Worf was brought up by adoptive parents, right? So, I mean, if that's the case, I would think that he would understand how much a loving situation can change the upbringing of a child. And so, the Roshenkos that brought him up, that took him on of adoption, invested in him that with that kind of love and parental guidance. And I would think that he would understand by reflecting on his own experience how important that is to the development of a young child. So that part is what bothered me a little bit. It would have been okay if he was conflicted because he was showing that emotion, but then having to turn it off publicly when in a public setting, so as not to give it away because he doesn't want to levy the sins of the father on the kid. But
Yeah.
I just wish he was more emotionally attached.
Yeah, he's kind of got that hanged man archetype, right? Where like he's self-destructive. He basically, somebody says, great job. We all know the person with great job. Nah, nah, I sucked. Oh, here, this girl likes you. Nah, she would never like me. I mean, like he's got such a self-defeatist attitude, it seems, like there's this lady that likes him and he's like, no, I don't want to bring disgrace on you. You have a son. I better just give him away rather than making him have a terrible life with me. Like it's so toxic and self-destructive. Like I'm pretty sure his son would rather live with him, even if there's shame amongst the Klingon Empire. Like he's still going to be like, okay, well, that sucks, but I still would want to live with my dad if my mom just died, And for Worf, he's so in his own head. He's so mopey. He's so self-destructive that it really seems like all he thinks about is himself. Remember, he now has this brother that he like adopted a brother. Remember that the brother needed a parent figure, a father figure. And rather than being that, he's like, I will be your friend. And then same thing with Kalar. She's like, well, if you can't be his dad, can you at least be his friend? And Worf's like, oh yeah, I could be his friend. I did that with that one kid for like 45 seconds and I never had to speak to him again. So yeah, I'll do
Yeah.
that. He also has his brother Kern that he met, doesn't talk to him. Like he is the worst family man ever. I mean,
Yeah.
there are jokes that are made about this where it's like, I think there was a meme where it's, Counselor Troy, goes up to Worf and she says, Happy Father's Day, Worf. And he's like, Father? He just got, he's like, oh, wait, am I? I totally forgot that I have a son. Anyway, poor Worf. Love that character, but my God, is he just the worst at this?
He's so difficult. He just makes everything so difficult. And being his friend is difficult. Being his, romantic interest in this particular case was difficult. Being his kid is difficult. When his parents came in that one episode, I felt like he was
Yeah.
difficult around them.
He's like a permanent 14-year-old. He's so mopey, dude, and moody and broody and like he's
But like,
fussy and he's whiny. Anyway.
but when he does get full of like, when he the thing that hits his button, like touches his nerve, when he's actually, I see Worf light up for one moment. The thing that lights him up, for example, when Picard tells him that Kempek was murdered by poison,
Mm-hmm.
and he looked up and he thought, that would mean he was killed with no honor, like that, like
Yeah.
that for some reason like lit him up. Like, wait a minute, I get
Yeah.
it. It's like that's the I get it moment for him. And it's
He
like,
loves
bro,
duty. Well, that's what it is.
duty.
It's like now we have a mystery I've solved that, and I can write something that was wrong. Like that's where he lives. He lives in duty and honor
Mm-hmm.
and loyalty, as long as it's professional loyalty, not personal loyalty. He doesn't give a shit. but you're right. Yeah, that's where he lives. He's like, his eyes get big. He's like, ooh, we can fix something. We can figure something out.
Yeah.
And then Alexander's like,
Or a
Father, and he's like, not now. I'm doing something else. Get out of here.
and by the way, just on a side note too, I felt like this is kind of the storyline they used in the new Picard when they brought back Beverly and Jack Crusher. They essentially used this storyline like we looked up a long time ago. I came
As
back.
Picard, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a recycled storyline later on in the future. It's another vibe I got when I watched it. At least, I mean, Picard was a lot better at the welcome home moments.
And now you see why, we've said this a million times, but now you're getting even more perspective as to why we really, as fans, appreciated the Siskos. Because Star Trek comes from a long line of deadbeat dads, basically. You know what I mean? From Kirk
That's what
to
I'm seeing.
Picard to Worf, even Data. Data like killed he created an offspring and then put her to sleep or something. Like it was tragic and beautiful, but like man, and then there you have Captain Sisko, that's just like the model of fatherhood, and Joseph
Yeah.
Sisko, the model of fatherhood. And we're like, thank you. The future was bleak until the Siskos
Yeah.
came along for fatherhood.
Yeah, it was. And look, it's a level of dysfunction there that unfortunately we keep seeing repeated. Um, and I'm glad that Avery Brooks and this portrayal of Benjamin Sisko was something that actually approached fatherhood with the sensitivity that it needs, and these relationships, and understanding that the investment that you put in this child pays forward in the future about the kind of man they grew up to be. And I would think, some of the things that Worf would want to do would instill that level of duty and honor into his offspring, so that he understood that tradition of what, to place value in those things, instead of the way he approaches it, which is very off-putting. Like, oh God, I see I have to do this, and she deals with that in a very good way. Kalar, when she says, he says, "Why did you not tell me?" She says something bad, because I knew what you would have done. Right? He
Yeah,
would have said, "We have to, whatever
get
that
married.
ceremony is, get married," essentially, right? And she wants to be a free and independent woman, and she doesn't want to be under Worf's thumb, basically, essentially, because it looks like he's really pouty and bossy, and that's not what she wants.
He is a powder. He's the biggest powder in all of Star Trek ever.
Yeah. So a little bit dysfunction on the Worf daddy duty
Worf
front.
Daddy. That's what Kalar calls him.
And that's a website, right?
Yeah, Worf Daddy.
WorfDaddy.com.
Ridged for never mind. So look, no, I'm just because his forehead, that's all. His forehead is ridged. But
I'm not touching that.
we did, if you'll recall, on Deep Space Nine, I think probably the seventh season, sixth or seventh season, we met a grown-up adult Alexander.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because like, what is he like? Seven by the time season seven of Deep Space Nine, and
They age
nine.
fast. They age fast.
They age super fast. But remember, he was like a new recruit on like not Gowron, Martok's ship or something like that. And then, and he was like terrible and they were making fun of him. But then the Klingons started thinking of him as a good luck charm and they accepted him. There was like that whole arc right there. So that character that we met in Deep Space Nine is this little guy, Alexander. So we will see more of Alexander in the future. Yippee for that. And so that'll be a lot of fun to see this he's like this tiny little Klingon. It's so funny. Like it's really cute to see this tiny little skinny thing with his giant Klingon forehead. It's always fun. But what did you think of Alexander overall? Anything?
Um, no, I thought that the actor was good at just playing this kind of like, I couldn't read his face about how he felt about the situation he was living in. I thought he did a good job. The thing that I felt the most emotionally attached to was the scene where he sees his mom kind of dead in front of her, and I didn't really like the fact that they did that. I thought it was too much for me, especially when Worf says,
That dark.
"Look at that."
Yeah.
Like
What a
normally
terrible
you would,
dad. He's just the
yeah,
worst dad ever. He's like,
yo,
oh, look,
what
your
the
mom
hell?
died. No, no,
Yeah,
no. Please look at her bloodied, dead, lifeless body. Look at it. Smell
and
her rotting
remember this
corpse.
day,
Yeah.
and
Take a
remember this
picture.
moment. Yeah, like the way he said that was like, I was like, whoa, this, okay, maybe that's the Klingon way, but I don't know. That's not, to me. It felt emotional. I was emotional about it. I felt like the natural thing to do would be to grab the kid and shield their eyes from having to see something like that. You know what I mean? Or tell them to go out of the room, say, Alexander, go get out of here. You don't need to see this. Something to that effect that I think would be the natural reaction of a person who has paternal instincts, which clearly Worf does not, because his instincts would be the exact opposite. Like, soak it in, put your hands in the blood.
And then never talk to me again, by the way. After you watch your mom get slaughtered and die, just don't call or write. By the way, real quick, did we have, was Troy or Geordi in this episode? I feel like maybe they were not.
I don't remember seeing them. I don't remember seeing them. No.
I will say the Alexander lines reminded me of Molly, the Molly lines in Deep Space Nine, because
a little bit.
They give little kids very quick and short lines. Like when he said, "Let me hold it," I was like, "Whoa, that feels like a Molly line and a Molly delivery." You know what I mean? Like, no, give me that. I'm hungry. Those things.
Yeah.
Hey,
those are just remedial kid writing.
We're almost out of time already. Where'd my baseball go? Is this it? Here it is. Who gets the home run of this episode?
I'm going to give it to the Klingons in this episode, and that's going to extend between Kempek, who I thought was excellent in the scene with Picard in the beginning. He really has like this James Earl Jones bigness to his personality. I felt like he was a larger than life kind of Klingon hero. So the Kempek character was great to me. Bob O'Reilly playing Gowron was excellent to me. And the final of that trio is Susie Claxton playing K'Ehleyr. So the Klingons. I'm not going to include, unfortunately, my guy. Yeah,
Durex. You don't want to include Durex?
No, I wasn't a big fan of his performance, actually.
What about, and then Alexander, Worf? There's all kinds of Klingons.
No, I'm giving it to those three.
Got it. Okay. I think for me, this is a toughie. I'm going to give it to Bob O'Reilly, but it's a lot closer than I'd like because he didn't have a ton of scenes. He had very little with which to work. Of course, he did beautifully. He did a great job. I think Susie Claxton also did very well. She had a little bit more to work with. Those two very clearly, to me, were big time. Kempek was great too, but we didn't see as much of him. He really had one scene. But
he had one scene, but he killed that one scene.
Sure did.
And this thing also, one thing I want to say really quickly is that this episode reminded me that the Klingon are very much like samurai warriors.
Yes.
I felt like when I watched Kempek, his outfit looked like a samurai kind of, elder statesman. And the way the bat'leth was hanging on the wall, again, kind of samurai-like when Worf went to grab it. All of these things reminded me that the Klingon have a very samurai-like respect, honor, dignity, and craftsmanship to killing. So I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed about this episode as well.
And that's absolutely deliberate. It's been mentioned before, so good catch on your part. That is actually what inspired them for sure. Later on, at first I think it was the USSR, the big, back in the 60s, but then here they've clearly become about duty and honor and warrior, like, it's really fun. So here are some other fun people that love duty and honor, although Homer spells duty differently. Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Titus Mohler, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C, Dieckmann, Anil O, Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Goo, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allyson Leach-Heid, Julie Manosfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, Chris Sternett, Dylan Powell, Peter Draymore, and of course, Jason Okun, and Greg K. Wickstrom. All right, everybody, stick around. We've got the free-for-all up next. They want to talk Klingons, and we'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Wow. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton. This is the free-for-all with Melissa Longo.
Hello there.
Jason M. Okun. Eve England out in Wales. TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri. Allyson Leach-Heid out in the home of rhubarb, or used to be. Mai is live in Tokyo. What is that? The home of like cherry blossoms or something cool, right?
There you
Sapporo. Carrie Schwent's got some eyes behind her. Eyes, baby. Faith Howell is on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Chris McGee laughed politely at that joke. And Homer Frizzell is wearing a cool Melissa creation.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Thanks for wearing that shirt. And thanks for buying that shirt.
I love it. Thank you.
All right, Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I'm gonna say 7-1. 7-1.
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know? Okay, somebody got a mute or something. Any guesses?
8-2.
8-2.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot high and say 8-8.
I'm going to guess 7-6.
8-1.
Wow. A lot of variables, a lot of variance, I should say. The answer is Victor Wembanyama's height, 8'3". Just kidding, he's 7'4", but it's an 8'3".
Wow.
8-3.
Yeah,
I
that
almost
was
went 8-3.
higher than I would have
That's-
expected.
Pretty good. Okay.
Did we get any non-appearance mentions today? I got 2.
Well, the Rozhenkos.
That's them. Anything else? All right. Chris, did we have any some kinds of or some sorts of?
There's a non-appearance reference, which is to Kern, his brother.
Did he say my brother?
Yeah.
He did say his brother.
That's a non. There it is.
That's an
Then.
AM.
Yep.
That's it.
All right. Man,
job,
that was
Robert.
exciting.
It's really exciting.
Good catch.
Any some kinds of or some sorts of?
I didn't hear any.
All right. Melissa Longo, it's way too quiet here. Can you get us started off on the right track and tell us what you thought of this episode?
Sure. I enjoyed this episode, actually. And I don't actually remember watching this episode before. And it was eye-opening. It definitely gave me some backstory into Worf and why he's the kind of father that he is. And the thing I love about Worf is that, one, he's far from perfect, but two, he understands and owns up to his own limitations. And discovering that he has a kid and not being prepared for this and knowing that, he's been ostracized by the Klingons, so he's not, doesn't have honor in his family. He doesn't want to put that on Alexander. And, but he also, I think, in a way, understands that he's not prepared for fatherhood, which makes it all the more understandable why he sends Alexander away to his parents who raised him, and which says a lot about his parents too, in that he trusts his parents a lot to raise this child with a woman that he cared deeply for. And I can only imagine what that must be like to discover you have a child and then have this woman that you were contemplating spending your life with suddenly get murdered, and then discover that, that heinous act in front of this new child. I'm trying not to be distracted by the chat. um, but it makes me understand Worf more, and how seeing this child could remind him of Killar as well. When he, and then Alexander, I don't know why he gets such, I'm gonna say it, shit from Star Trek fandom, because this poor kid sees his mother die in front of him, and then she's his whole world, and then he gets sent off to strangers, and then what a tough life he's had at such a young age, and then people are ragging on him for not fitting in with the Klingons, or not fitting in with humans, or not fitting in anywhere. How else is he supposed to learn how to fit in if he's never had a place to fit in until after his mother died. So yeah, it filled in a lot of backstory for me, which I really enjoyed. And and now I want to read the chat.
Feel free to do so.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Melissa Longo. Jason M. Okun is here. He's like, I read the chat like 6% of the time. What'd you think of this episode?
Well, it's always been one of my favorites, and I think, to some degree, it's one of the more unusual episodes of The Next Generation, partly because it's certainly not a standalone. You really have to have sort of know the history of the characters, and it's a continuing story, which is more of a deep space kind of episode, frankly, than the typical your Next Gen episode. You get the Worf story, you get the story about the Klingons. Something is going on, and frankly, other than sort of an extra set, it is for the most part a bottle episode, but you don't notice that. Something is always happening. You can get a lot of sort of guest characters coming in. And obviously, the character of Gowron has continued for many, many years, all the way, almost to the to the end of Deep Space Nine. I mean, this is something that starts that kind of a story going. So there's a lot of excitement to a degree. I think it's very well directed by Jonathan Frakes. I think the writing is tremendous. I think the episode just works. It's going to move swiftly. You obviously will get introduced to Worf's son, whatever you think of, whether it's a good or bad sort of story. And one thing that kind of gets lost to some degree is, sort of a sentiment of the Klingons. You get this little child and Worf saying, look upon this violent death. That's really not something you do with a human child. So it's kind of an interesting sentiment. I mean, if we apply sort of our own morals to it, it's not what you want to see. But again, the hour moves swiftly. I think it's very, very well done. And, one thing I want to mention is, the subtlety in acting. I mean, it's held up by acting quite a bit. And I do like Patrick's performance here. If you look at the way the script goes and the way, certain scenes were played, by Patrick specifically, it's wonderful. It certainly sort of pops off the page, frankly. I mean, it's a very well put together script, but I think it looks even better on the screen, which is, certainly kudos to the cast and, to Patrick specifically. I think, he didn't have the easiest of tasks, portraying Picard in that fashion. The last thing I'll say is there's almost a non-appearance mention here that I'll save for later.
Whoa.
Jeez.
Damn, that was a good tease.
Yeah.
All right, thanks very much, Jason M. Okun. Eve England is here, and she's sad. She's like, I'm probably not going to stick around for that tease, so just text it to me later. What do you think of this episode?
Yeah, I thought this was really good. I think we've had a couple of slow episodes, so this to me, felt really good pace to it, really good story, really lots of great character development. And I kind of felt it did have that sort of Shakespearean element to it. It felt like a chapter out of a big saga or something. You had the history, you had the future, and where we know some of this is going to go for Deep Space Nine. So I liked how we had that complexity. But what I also was, I suppose I really liked, but I was surprised at, as we kind of, Jason just alluded to it, it very much was sort of a much more brutal, darker episode than what we're used to. And they've obviously done a few of these in the past, but I think, it sort of stuck out quite drastically in terms of, the trauma, the brutality of it. And I quite liked how they used the sort of concept of this culture clash throughout the different sort of relationships between the different characters, about the human versus the Klingon, and how everything comes together and how they all end up being intertwined. So yeah, I just thought there was so much drama there. I felt it felt like a bit rushed by the end. It felt like a lot of content that they could have maybe done over a couple of episodes possibly. And I did quite like the sort of reverse Star Wars quote when Worf goes, yes, I am your father, instead of no, I am your father. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks very much, Eve England out in Wales, who's watching these episodes for the first time ever. Eve, real quick, Worf, good or bad dad?
Yeah, I didn't really approve of the you have to watch your dead mother on the floor when he's clearly quite young and a bit vulnerable. So yeah, not the best parenting.
Yeah, maybe wait till he's older. Yeah.
I had a bit of sort of he'd already admitted that he had no clue about sort of Klingon culture generally. So this was a massive culture shock to him. Bless him.
Bless him. Thanks very much, Eve England out in Wales. TJ Jackson-Bey is out in Missouri, probably. Cool Chat Pack shirt and hat. What'd you think of this one?
Well, I enjoyed watching this episode again. Some of the story elements that stood out to me. Well, first of all, before the story elements, I thought the guest performances were excellent, especially Susan Paxton, Bob O'Reilly. I'm not sure who was playing Duras, but I thought they all, really, really carried, the roles that they were given, to be, guests, and also portraying, the Klingon culture more extensively than, we had seen, prior to now. We've been to Kronos, a time or two here and seeing, different Klingon episodes, but it's getting into Klingon politics. And I just thought that they really acted their roles excellently. And then moving into the story elements, speaking of acting excellently, the look on K'Ehleyr's face when she and Worf first went into this turbo lift, and she's like looking at him with this like sheepish grin on her face, waiting for him to say something. Just priceless, great acting, especially through that makeup. I appreciated that, she knew him well enough to know that he's not being straight with all of this, dishonor stuff, and that there's more to this story, and she wants to find out what it is. I also appreciated the way that she accepted herself and her son, knowing they're not fully Klingon, not fully human, and they're kind of in between these cultures. And she tells Worf he will find his own ways. And knowing how that story goes forward, that will continue, I think, to be a struggle for even Worf to accept, and even Alexander himself to be, caught in between, these cultures. But he does end up finding his own way. So I appreciate that she was able to see that from the beginning. And I also appreciated, Captain Picard, kind of supporting Worf with this dishonor thing, because every time the Klingons come knocking, Worf is like, oh, I'm dishonored. I can't deal with that because they'll be mad or, whatever. And Picard is pretty much like, this is my ship, and they're not going to tell me, which officers can do the work that I need them to do, because this dishonor thing means nothing to me, basically, is how Picard feels about it. But he also tells Worf that he understands that this is hard for him. And that was, I thought, pretty excellent. I have so much more, but I'll leave that for things left unsaid.
Ooh, juicy. Thanks very much, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri. All right. When I say Ferengi eyes, you say Allyson. Oh, and Carrie too. But Allyson Leach-Heid is up next. What did you think of this one?
I've always loved this episode, but anytime we get to see Susie, I get really excited because K'Ehleyr is a wonderful character. She performs her to a T, and other than the gray costume, her costumes are the best. that red one with all the sparkles on it. Love her in that. And the way she is forever teasing Worf and being serious with him all at the same time is just wonderful to watch. Made me realize that Worf has a type. And I'm like, yeah, Jadzia and Kalar, they're very similar. I get this. And he has the same reaction that all the women he loves, he gets reprimands for something for them. So he's on brand there. Tons of firsts in this episode. It's our first Bathleth fight. And it's, of course, our first episode with Gowron and Alexander. And Lieutenant J this is her first episode too. So that's so cool.
I didn't see her. Where was she?
Me neither.
I have no idea. I found it on Memory Alpha. I'm like, yeah.
Damn, I thought for sure I would catch her, but no, I missed it.
So she's in there. We'll have to go watch again and see if we can spot her. So that also makes me really happy. And let's see what else. Love that Alexander's in the chair in Worf's to get him eye to eye with his dad. That's a great scene. And I think finally, I'll keep mine fairly short today. I loved seeing Tasha's weapon from Code of Honor on Worf's weapons stand. I'm like, I don't know if they knew that or they had it there as like, that's his homage to Tasha. Like, this is how he remembers her. So that's my headcanon for that. So I love seeing that. I'm like, Tasha. So it shows, I think, that Worf is a little bit more of a softie than we give him credit for. So I liked seeing that. Oh, I'll do one more thing. The flower arrangement in Kalar's quarters was amazing. I loved all the cattails sticking out of it. I thought it was truly cool just to have that really fun floral arrangement in the background next to the cool painting. So go set dressers. They're doing a great job.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Allyson Leach-Heid. With love in her eyes and flowers in her hair. Mai is live in Tokyo. That's Led Zeppelin, I think, right? What do you think of this one?
It was a curious, some great comments. I don't even know how to follow all this stuff. Wow. Totally agree with what you said at the beginning, Melissa. Allyson, you killed it there. I mean, wow. Lots of great comments. Everybody. A lot of emotion in this one. But I think, to me, what was most interesting was how they interwove so many themes. We saw, for example, that love is a theme. Love in a variety of ways. The love of a mother for her child with Kalar and Alexander. Love between two partners with Worf and Kalar. There was love of an adopted uncle almost, as Picard at the end is taking care of Worf. And I felt that there was that kind of a relationship there. The reference to multi-generational love with Worf's parents looking after Alexander, giving him a life. I thought there was some really cool stuff going on there. There was a theme of honor deserved, with Gowron and Duras both having the right to fight for the leadership of the Klingons. Honor deserved when Picard was appointed the person to manage the succession. The theme of false honor, I thought, was interesting, with Duras having the right to challenge Gowron at all because he didn't have that right theoretically. There was, and this is for you, Homer, there was even a Shakespearean theme of poisoning the king with Kempek, which I thought was kind of cool. But the one theme which for me was very curiously handled was that of paternity. Any person who's had a child they know of from the beginning, or whose existence they learn of later after the fact, as was the case here, I think immediately feels a sense of protection and caring and responsibility. Otherwise, they're just simply walking excrement, in my opinion, as a parent. While it's true that not all parents are in a position, however, to act as a parent for their children, the feelings, in this case paternity, are not diminished in the least by that inability to take care of the child. I'm not sure if the writers were making an intentional comment on wayward fathers in society at the time, or if they were in fact trying to engender a feeling of warmth with Worf's ultimate acceptance of Alexander. Either way, I thought that Worf came across as a really crappy dad in this one. And just because we like a character, and I really do like Worf a lot for a lot of reasons, I don't think we can avoid being honest about how he was portrayed here. So this episode, what did I think of it? I'll give it a grade that I'd be inclined to give to the U.S. Olympic swimming team this time. A passing mark, but not one of excellence.
Mai saying what we're all thinking about the U.S. swim team. Thank you very much for that, Mai, live in Tokyo. Carrie Schwent is here, also Ferengi Eyes. What do you think of this one?
I love this one on so very many levels. I've got a few fun facts that I came across in my research prep that I'll say for things left unsaid. I'll save this segment for a bit of gushing on a couple of the guest stars. Start off, you've got the man himself, Gowron, and his amazing eyes. Every time he popped his eyes open and he grinned, showing all of his teeth, just brings me so much joy. It was those eyes that had me recognizing him immediately in that episode of Dr. Quinn that he was in that I've mentioned in the past. As soon as I saw his eyes, I'm like, oh yeah. And I got to talk to him about that role on our first cruise, and he is just such a sweetheart. And like Allyson, I love Susie Plaxton so much. I get very excited whenever she comes up. She is just plays all of her roles with just great resting sarcasm, like not too over the top, just enough that you're laughing along with her. It's the same way with the character that she plays on one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek Voyager as well. And she looks just as amazing in that. I love her. The longer her hair is, I think she looks absolutely gorgeous. And she also has a gorgeous singing voice. I looked up some of her music. Her singing voice is fantastic. I highly recommend if you haven't listened to her before, look it up. You won't be sorry. Now, Kempek, I call him the adorable grumpy puss. He's he's completely resigned to his fate. He's like, you know what? I know it's poison. I'm dying anyway. What the hell? I'm just gonna keep drinking it anyway, because it's blood wine and I enjoy it. And something he says to Picard, we've heard somebody else say that to Picard before also, because he says, if I had asked, you would have said no. The Bynars, and I think it was season 1, say the same thing to Picard at the end when he's asking about why didn't you just ask us, we would have helped you. They say the same thing to him. And yeah, I like that very much. He was adorable. And if you look really, really closely when they're doing the paint sticks in the Sanchi ceremony, he's breathing. You can see him breathing just a little bit. But I'll let it slide. And I decided for the limerick for the episode is dedicated to Kempek, so I'll end with that. I have been poisoned. My life will soon end. To the council I no longer must bend. I know Sto-Vo-Kor awaits, but the bloodline's still great. This warrior soul is not filled with dread.
Excellent work. Thank you very much. Carrie Schwent with the eyes behind her. Faith Howell is on the bridge of the Enterprise. Dee, what'd you think of this one?
You guys have already taken all of the words completely out of my mouth. I will just chime in and say that it is also one of my favorite episodes. I love Susie Plaxton. I love Kalar. I think it is such a loss that we only got her for 2 episodes. I think she would have been great to pop in seasonally, if not more. She was so good for Worf. I will say that I think it is heartbreaking that this starts off Worf's really, really terrible track record with women who not only don't make it, but die in his arms, basically. So, yeah, terrible.
Must have been something you said. Thank you. You got that. You guys are quick.
I was thinking the same song.
I think it was just the way Faith delivered it. Like she almost said it with a little bit of musicality. Thanks very much, Faith Howell. Awesome shirt from J.R. Poole and the cool work that he did for the Prodigy Writers Room. Chris McGee's the Dark Lord. He's here. He's wearing an item from Walking Art made by Melissa. What do you think of this one?
Oh, yeah, this is a fantastic continuation of the ongoing saga of Klingon politics and Worf's discommendation with the usual players, Kempek, Duras, and now Gowron. I'd almost even say that it was Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones. Speaking of Gowron, this, of course, is our first time meeting him, played by the fantastic Robert O'Reilly. Of course, most of us have foreknowledge of Gowron thanks to the DS9 reviews. So this episode almost seems a little bit quaint. It's like rewatching the first couple seasons of DS9 after you know about the founders. When this episode first aired, of course, no one knew anything about Gowron, so it was entirely possible that he was Kinpeck's murderer. The episode even drops little hints towards that too that I appreciate, such as Gowron smirking at Kinpeck's body after using the pain stick on it, attempting to bribe K'Ehleyr, making threats, etc. Like the moment when Worf refused to help the dying Romulan in the third season episode The Enemy, the unexpected turn of events at the end of this episode was also quite a shock at the time, and I greatly appreciate that decision by the writers. And as TJ mentioned, I also greatly appreciate the earlier scene where Picard tells Worf that he is aware that this whole situation puts him in an uncomfortable position. It's exceedingly rare to see that from anyone at the top of a hierarchy, such as a command structure like Starfleet. And especially so in today's corporate world where employees are put in difficult positions all the time. For my memorable quote, it's, of course, from K'Ehleyr with her, what Carrie describes as resting sarcasm, not even a bite on the cheek for old time's sake.
Thanks very much, Dark Lord Chris McGee. Great stuff. Homer Frizzell is here, number one Yankees fan. What do you think of this one?
Number two after Walter. I enjoyed this one. I was looking for where Worf goes wrong as a father, and he starts right off wrong. I thought that he should have taken a little more time with the Batleth, given his son a lesson there, instead of just being, oh, like it's an extension of your hand or your arm and this kind of thing. Also, I would have loved to have seen them on the holodeck, but I know that there was time constraints. I thought he took the very easy way out by sending Alexander to his parents. There are 13 other planets worth of folks serving on Starfleet. There's Wesley Crusher. I'm sure there are other kids there. So I thought that was really easy. It would have been really interesting to see the different shenanigans that Alexander and Wesley could have gotten up to. Well, maybe not. Yeah. So what else? I thought of this episode when I first started watching it as how to host a murder with just two suspects. And I cannot for the life of me figure out why they did that explosion, because I'm not sure what there was to gain, but maybe that's something that could be discussed later. I don't know why that happened. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks very much. Homer Freezy out somewhere in New Yeezy, we once heard TJ say, and we never stopped saying it after that. Jake's final take. Cirroc, any final thoughts on this episode?
One, I was going to say that when Picard first got proposed with this Kinpeck kind of murder mystery, it reminded me of that inner private investigator inside him. You know, that role that he likes to play, Dixon or something?
Yeah, Dixon Hill.
Dixon Hill. Yeah.
Got a little Dixon inside of him.
Yeah. Well, I felt like that persona was kind of activated in him to some degree, where he was like, oh, a mystery to solve. And that was appealing to him. So I thought that was a great way to get Picard kind of on board with this whole ceremony as far as a writing tool. The other thing that slightly bothered me was the fact that K'Ehleyr is such a witty and well-written character, and she's so well played. So to me, she seems like a very competent, smart, independent mother that was able to be an ambassador for the Federation. So she has to be like super skilled. as far as intelligence. The way she was investigating the mystery of Duras and kind of looking up his files and all of that stuff, that shows her intelligence to me. And what I feel like was poorly done as far as the writing was when she confronts Duras, it is an invitation to get murdered, essentially. You're talking to a guy who is under investigation for murder. You're in a close quarters with him, not in a public space. And you're telling him some private information that he's tried to bury for years, which he's willing to cover up on any level. So why would you walk into that trap as an independent, smart person that she is? She would definitely not put herself in that position and reveal to him that she knows this kind of information in that setting, perhaps in front of the crew with Picard there, or in a public setting, yes, but not in my quarters. And you and I are the only witnesses to this conversation. So I thought there's a discredit to how smart I know this woman is. And then the last part for me is when Picard was dressing down Worf at the end for having killed Duras. I thought he came down on him a little bit too hard. This is a guy that deserves to be murdered, technically, right? It's like, we know what he's done. We know we saw what he did to Kalar. So the audience already feels like, this is this guy deserves to be murdered, essentially, for all we care. So I don't see why Picard would come down on him so hard for having the natural reaction of killing, the mother of his child. Like, this kind of rage is normal for non-Klingons. If somebody were to get caught in a situation like that, they call it temporary insanity, where, all of these emotions are struck upon you, and you're so personally tied to the situation that in some cases you're actually excused for murder because you murdered the right person that deserved to be murdered, essentially. So I don't see why Picard would come so hard on him with the reprimand. He said a reprimand will appear on your record. He gave him the whole lecture about 13 planets choosing to serve the Federation and whatnot. And I'm like, what? We just watched like 6 episodes ago where you murdered like 1,500 people from Starfleet in the Wolf 359 battle, right? Didn't that happen? And did he get dressed down that hard for the lives that he took? Because I didn't see that. If it did occur, I didn't see it on screen. Like an admiral talking to him in that kind of way that he's talking to Worf. So that's the problem I had. Those are my big issues right now. But as far as the guest stars that we saw, I think they really knocked it out of the park. It was just like everybody delivered. O'Reilly was great, and I love the Kempek character. He was so good, and obviously Susie Plaxton was like super great. She's a star in her own right. So that's my final thing. And the music was A+. I also jumped out at me at one point. I wrote music A+. It was just like phenomenal music. So once again, the score was knocked out of the park for me.
Do you guys notice how like in the first second the music kicks in and the table's already set, you're like, oh, something's about to go down. It's not gonna be a silly episode. You get right into it. That was Jake's final take. Thank you to Homer, Chris, Faith, Carrie, Mai, Allison, TJ, Eve, Jason, and Melissa. For myself, Cirroc Lofton, Melissa Longo, Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. And until next time, always remember the 7th rule.